So I've been here 3 years. Well, this is my fourth year. Actually, I've been here almost 4 years. We've been much bigger in the past. In my time here, we've hovered around 700 or so, but I think they've been much higher than that in the past. And we were over sort of 3,200 in the past. We're down to about 2,800 now total.
Okay. Very good.
All right, so we should probably time it up.
Okay.
Gotta get back to our beginning screen. There you go.
Over here.
Yeah. Oh, you have two. You have it up
That's what I'm
twice.
saying.
It
Well,
looks
because
like.
I have the actual view, versus the. Hold on. Okay. Do the presentation. Slideshow. See, then I can't get back to Zoom. So weird. Oh, well, that's right. Okay.
Everybody see the screen?
Can you see my PowerPoint or no?
Not yet.
There you go. That's the one. Sure.
Yeah, I'm just making sure it's at the beginning.
Okay, we got it. There we go.
Yes.
Okay. Thought we'd open up with a prayer. Let us pray. O eternal God, bless all schools, colleges, universities, and especially Hunterdon Central here in Harlan County, that all may be lively centers for sound learning, new discovery, and the pursuit of wisdom. And grant that all who teach and learn may understand, Lord, that you are the source of all truth. Amen.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We are very pleased to have Superintendent Jeff Moore with us today, and also our brand new prosecutor. And so we're going to first go through a little bit of information about One Voice. I think most of you do know about us, but we are a community coalition that collaborates with faith communities to address social issues. We also bring together law enforcement, community partners, and our faith communities to have one voice. And our specific focus is to prevent substance misuse in youth 12 to 18. And we want to encourage all of us to recognize that youth associated with faith are less likely to misuse substances. So we are very passionate about bringing that to the forefront.
Yep.
Father Harry, here's our staff.
Mhm.
Do you want to kind of introduce our staff? And I think
Okay.
Michael is here.
All right, Peggy Dowd is our program director. I'm project outreach coordinator. Allison Belly is our youth coordinator. Michael, you want to say a few words about what you do?
Sure, I'm a project coordinator part-time for One Voice. Dr. Moore and Prosecutor Robeson, so grateful that both of you can participate today. Besides coordinating my efforts with the faith community, I'm also spent some time with other sectors, and primarily Prosecutor Robeson, I've spent quite a bit of time with law enforcement, and so I think I've gotten to know most of the law enforcement people within the county. So we look forward to working with you also, Prosecutor. Thank you.
Courtney, you're
Oh, sorry. Yes, and hi. I work part-time as a pastor at Larison's Corner Presbyterian in Ringo's. And I also am part-time outreach coordinator here, and I will be working in regional faith leader sections. I also produce the weekly updates, the Faith Factor and the One Voice update. So if you ever have anything you want to share in that, just let me know. And I'm very excited. I'm a relatively new, the newest staff member, and it's very exciting to be a part of this. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Now we want to welcome our new acting prosecutor, Renee Robeson. Renee lives in Flemington and is a lifelong resident of our county. And she served as an assistant prosecutor in Mercer County for over 17 years. She began her legal career as an associate learner, David Littenberg and Krumholtz and Mentlick, and that's in Westfield. And her words after oath, I think these are worth saying. Do you want to say those, Prosecutor Robeson?
If you'd like me to, that's
Yeah, I'd like to
fine.
hear you say it.
Okay, hold on.
Not too often I get to tell a prosecutor what to do.
Right?
It should be
Okay.
on my shared
Should be on the
screen.
share screen.
Can you see that?
If
hold
not,
on.
It's okay. We can read it.
we can read it. It's no problem.
No, that's okay. I've got it.
You
So,
got it? Okay.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
All right. So my words that I spoke at the swearing in that that are true again today. We continue to be at a moment in America's history when those of us that are entrusted with the administration of justice at every level must do more in every way to establish and maintain the trust of those we serve. And this requires renewed diligence, transparency, and effort. And I understand that great trust comes with my office, and I look forward to exerting every ounce of my energy to serving justice, our state, our county, the team I lead, and the public I work to protect.
No, thank you for that.
And I'll say that I am so thankful for this opportunity to be here to serve my home community. I did grow up here. I've lived here for the past 20 years, and I am a 1985 graduate of Hunterdon Central High School.
Woohoo!
And my
Ooh.
children have been educated through the schools here as well. My daughter graduated last year. The parade that they did, Superintendent Moore, was fantastic. That the graduation experience that you provided to the students for 2020 was just phenomenal. We enjoyed it as a family, and my son will be graduating next week as well.
Oh,
Mm,
wow.
wow.
Well, thank
Wow.
you and congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we'll introduce Jeffrey Moore, Dr. Jeffrey Moore. He's the superintendent of Hunterdon Central Regional High School, and he's been there since July 2017. He's worked 26 years in education, and some of his former roles include curriculum writer and publisher, presenter at national and state for that. He also has been a teacher himself, technology supervisor, assessment coordinator, and has a master and doctorate in educational administration and supervision from the Graduate School of Education at Rutgers. So we're very happy, Dr. Moore, to have you with us today. And do you want to say anything else that's missing from this slide about you?
No, thank you, except just that I'm pleased and honored to be here as well. So I've been looking forward to the conversation today. So thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so here are some of the topics you've shared with us that you're going to have an overview with us about. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so do you want
Shall
to
I start?
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you. And prosecutor, it's good to meet you. I'm eager to connect with you. Your office has been a great partner for schools across the county. In my time here, I'm now in my 4th year at Hunterdon Central, and the prosecutor's office here has been just a phenomenal partner that's unlike, I think, what happens in other counties. I noticed Frank on the line as well. Frank's a good friend of ours too, and One Voice and Harry. I've counted on sort of your counsel at different times, Harry, and also just have enjoyed the partnership. Hunterdon County is a place where relationships still work to solve problems, and I'm just overjoyed to be working in this county with folks who think in that way. And as we kind of come out of, and I'm hopeful that we're coming out of the pandemic, and thinking about what schools have to do and talking about the challenges ahead of us, I was interested in in really, in some ways, the opportunity ultimately to compare notes, because I think where schools and where other organizations like faith organizations might be facing some of the same challenges and some of the same thoughts right now as we figure out what's next. For schools, one of the things we're noting is that the rush back to normal is an almost potentially dangerous proposition for us, because we don't want to rush back to normal and ignore the things that weren't working about normal. And there's a lot of thought about and a lot of gratitude right now for some of the things that are getting back to normal, but schools have a moment to understand what needs to be done differently. And that's an important moment that we can't squander. And I think what we're seeing is something that we already knew, that there's a great need for us to personalize our efforts even more, and maybe even radically so, for each of our students. And schools are guilty, certainly, over many decades of funneling students, of tracking students, of looking at students with broad brushes, and not really empowering individual students with all of their strengths and interests to follow their aspirations and become who they want to be. And so that's what we see in this moment, the ability to stake those claims and make those changes as we come out of an experience that really cast a light on where we have been failing for many years on all of those things. And there are many topics, I think, through which we can discuss that, but I picked a few here today to go through that have been relevant in conversations with some of you in the past, and also which are relevant certainly to One Voice's mission, and just which are at the top of our head too, in schools, and which I think are opportunities for us to work together. I think when we talk about mental health and wellness for our students, what we saw before COVID, if we think back to late winter of 2020, our school had just experienced the loss of a student to suicide at the opening of the new year last year. And it was the third such situation that we had in my time here. And so this is a school that's lost greatly through self-harm and suicide. And also we've had tragedies that were the loss of students through accidents and other incidents. So this is a school that continues to mourn, and was in mourning as it went into lockdown, and was in the midst of work to rally around self-harm and suicide as a crusade for our community. And that work continues, certainly. Where we feel compromised right now is we've been through a school year in which we have not had our eyes on all of our students all day, every day in the way that we're used to. We've had portions of this school year where we were only meeting students 2 days a week. We have large numbers of students throughout the year who have been on fully remote instruction and weren't on campus through mandates from the DOE and from the governor to offer that kind of program. And we've had students too who've, we've only been in session in person for a portion of the day. We haven't done full days yet for all of the distancing and masking requirements and the challenges in offering lunch and all of those kinds of full day sorts of things. So we're feeling compromised in our ability to keep tabs in the way that schools are traditionally able to keep tabs. A lot goes on to keep an eye on students when we're here with everybody all day, every day. And so despite that, we've managed to continue to stay in touch a little bit. We've managed to continue to grow our mental health supports, and that work to broaden our efforts around self-harm and suicide and other mental health concerns has been able to continue this year. What we're facing as we move forward is the really stark realization that next year in September, 3/4 of our students will have had some kind of strange introduction to this place. So last year's freshmen, their year was cut short in March. This year's freshmen certainly had an odd introduction to the high school. And next year's freshmen are coming in to a school year that we hope is going to be as normal as possible, but which may still have a lot of public health and other considerations. So that's 3/4 of our students who need to be introduced differently, and certainly our seniors next year who need to be reintroduced to whatever normalcy we're able to offer next year. That's a tall order for us in terms of orientation to the campus and reintroduction to the campus. It's a lot of work around breaking down isolation that people have gotten sadly potentially accustomed to, and sort of remapping what our relationships look like in the school, even among staff, who many of them have been working remotely at different times this school year. We're also seeing now a mix of anxiety and I got to frankly put it in anger we're seeing across, it feels like across society, levels of anxiety that aren't just about the difficulties of coming back and maybe taking off masks next year and all of these things that feel like we've been waiting for them, but feel a little abnormal to us for all the habits we've been in. There's just a lot of anxiety around those decisions now. Is it going to be safe? These things that we've gotten used to that we might not need to do anymore in terms of all of the public health precautions. Vaccination and what role does that play and what pressures are there to be or not be vaccinated? These are anxieties that sort of live, if not on top of, sort of at least around the edges of everything that we're talking about and thinking about right now. And then on top of that, the sharper anxieties of those students who have found some way of flourishing in some of the remote instruction that they've been able to take, and who may not have the opportunity to do as much of that next year, and who have to be brought in softly back into our in-person community, where we do believe that there is a lot more for our kids. And we are seeing too just levels of frustration and anger, dysregulation that come out in such an anxious time. And I keep in my own head thinking of what I heard on the news the other morning about something like 20 times more people than normal having been kicked off of airplanes this year than in any other year. And a lot of that's over masking controversies and other things, but it does signal a level of angst in our collective society that is certainly troubling for schools as well. So we have a lot ahead of us as we continue the work that we've been doing with mental health and wellness, but also try to wrap our arms around the unique challenges of this time, challenges that we don't as schools fully understand yet because many of our students have not been with us full time all year. And in all of this too, the realization that there is trauma in what we've all been through, that there is loss that needs to be accounted for and reckoned with among our students and staff, that just the experience of the past year have damaged people in terms of what we've seen with COVID, but also what we're seeing across the country and in our community and in our school community with stress and traumatic stress that's tied to race-based traumatic stress and stress around inequities and social justice and other kinds of concerns along that line as well, which is a bit of a separate topic here for us. So our work is cut out for us, but it always has been, and I think is always a rich place for us to explore mindfulness and where other strategies for our students and staff can come to bear to help people ground themselves in the moment and try to walk out of whatever stress and anxiety they're experiencing. So I think those are rich fields for us to work together. As I move, and I'm going to just go through these areas, and then I guess we can have some discussion afterwards, right, Harry? Is that how we?
Yeah, that's what we'll do. I have questions. You can put your questions in the chat. And we've heard some already. So
okay, good. And I'll sort of take a look at those. I'm looking at a little bit of an outline I have on my screen right now to help me, and I'll circle back to look at the questions as I conclude. But substance abuse, and I've kind of brought substance abuse together with the mental health concern of self-medication because it points to what we were seeing before COVID. And certainly that's connected to the increase in potency and availability of THC products. We were seeing students presenting with urine levels of THC, for example, not to be indelicate, but that's how we measure those things, and levels that were off the charts from what we were used to seeing just years before because of the potency of vaping and dab pens and all of the other things that they were doing outside of traditional consumption of weed. And what we were seeing there certainly was an uptick in the number of students who we could certainly be concerned about, experiencing substance use disorder and not being able to stop their use. The landscape of legalization is very complicated for all of us, certainly, and particularly for schools, as students experiment with and are in an unclear kind of area in terms of what the legal implications of illegal use are for them. It's a good opportunity for additional cooperation with law enforcement and faith communities as we work together to kind of get the right message out to kids about dangers and responsibilities. One of our tools in the past, and Central has used quite a bit, is diversion programs for students who are abusing marijuana and THC, and where those sit in this current legal landscape of legalization is certainly unclear, and something that we'd mourn the loss of if that was something that we weren't able to kind of continue to use. We do also certainly have continued concerns about opioid use. We haven't seen that as broadly in our age group of students. We see that still on the level of older students or graduates rather. We have just lost a graduate to overdose here at Central in recent weeks, and that sadly is something that I've seen here in my four years here prior to just this past couple of weeks. But it's where students pursue substances and self-medication from a mental health position, where that interacts with their mental health concern, and where that leads them to harder and more dangerous substances, is a concern, deep concern that we have at Central, and I think throughout all schools. And our students are looking for something that these substances seem to be promising them at some point, and certainly they aren't delivering on that promise. Equity and bias is my last big area of discussion here, and what we were seeing before COVID across the country, but certainly here in our own community. In my time here at Central, again, I arrived in 2017 and 18 school year. My time here at Central, the schools become more diverse, and in one particular area, our Latina population, our Latinx population, has grown from 9% or so of our students when I arrived to close to 14-15% of our students now. So that's a growing population of people of color in our school system. We see growing needs from our LGBTQ+ students as minoritized, potentially marginalized group of students. We have students of all languages, all religions, all shades, all backgrounds. And we do see gaps. We see gaps in how students in different groups perform in terms of their achievement. We see gaps in terms of how our services reach these students. We see gaps in how these students appear in our most compelling programs, who takes our honors and AP courses, for example, and who doesn't. And seeing those gaps, I think we are obligated, we're duty bound to try to close them. And we see gaps in some other areas as well in terms of discipline. Who experiences discipline in our system? And we see disproportionalities that cut across race and other kinds of differences among kids in those areas as well. As soon as we see these, we need to begin to ask questions about bias in our system and what that means. Is there anything in our system that's stacked against kids from certain backgrounds and of certain orientations and other groups, and how do we address that? How do we close that? Across the country, schools are wrestling with some of these issues and also trying to make sense of social justice movements and events across our country, and trying to figure out where that fits into our education of kids and our responsibility to the community. And there's a lot of controversy here at Central, certainly about that, and controversy across the country as people square off and throw labels around and try to figure out, are we talking about equity or are we talking about Marxism? Are we talking about opportunity, or are we talking about critical race theory? You know, these are the kinds of discussions that people are having, and I think it intersects with some of the anger that I was talking about earlier, in terms of just the heightened frustration and level of rough discourse that everybody's experiencing now. The legal landscape for schools right now is pretty clear. We have mandates to teach anti-racism, and we have in the Youth Bias Task Force report new mandates that are growing to train our staff and our students on anti-bias education and breaking down bias and exploring different types of bias, including the kinds of systemic bias that exist in our rules despite our best intentions potentially. So we have a lot of work to do on all fronts there, but wrapped up in that work is very difficult work to share and talk with and work with students and staff in the community so that we can have this difficult conversation and do this very difficult work, but at the same time hear all of the feedback that we need to hear. But again, the mandate is clear that it's work that needs to be done. And again, we do see where we have gaps that we need to close them for kids. We also see there, deep possibilities for, again, how we work with other organizations, including faith-based organizations across the county. You know, what is the common message that we all need to send about dignity, about equity and equality before the universe, before God, before whomever, whatever it is that folks are looking toward as they try to reckon, all that we're doing here and now with what's the larger truth of what we're doing here in the universe. So it's big work for us in schools, and maybe more than anything else, it challenges our notions of how we deliver personalization to our kids. When we see a student from Central America who speaks Spanish and struggles with English, how do we personalize our experience for that student and regard that student's differences as strengths and not immediately as weaknesses? And how do we empower that student to grow with equal opportunity that all of our other students might have, despite some of the challenges that student faces? How do we empower that student through his or her strengths to overcome those challenges? These are very deep equity questions for us, but they're not questions that we can ask, that we can answer or even ask, I think, in a world in which we're not seeing that student's color or background or challenges, and we're not trying to reckon with them in a real way to empower that student. And that ultimately means that our approach for every student might end up needing to be a little bit different rather than a broad brush in which all students are kind of funneled through the same kind of experience. So we've got a lot here that we already knew in schools, but that I think, again, the light of the pandemic has shown us, and the other experiences of the past year have shown us we still have a lot of work to do. I kind of end this overview. It's a little sour, but I ended on a happier note, because I think at the end of the day, the work we do in schools is just inherently optimistic. We work now to seed a better future, and we don't necessarily get to enjoy the fruits of our labors down the road as we invest in kids now and sort of send them off to build a better world and help us all deliver on a better promise. In that, as we look at back to normal again, and circling back to that notion, as we look at what back to normal means, we have to ask serious questions that I think we were already asking going into the pandemic. Is the normal operation of schools really delivering on the promise that we want to achieve in schools as we look toward that optimistic work of preparing, not preparing kids for the future, but preparing the future. And again, if we are really looking at all means all in schools, if we're really looking at that and really looking at, well, what does that mean for the individual student? It really means a radical personalization of our approach for kids. It means breaking down some of the streams in which we put students and kind of hope that they come out okay on the other end. It means opening our minds to different outcomes for students so that we're not engaging in a one-size-fits-all model that when kids don't fit, they experience stress and discomfort and then fall into some of the traps of things that we've talked about here. And it really means sort of looking in on how students can get through their stress and anxiety, find themselves in the present moment, and really determine, you know, what their next steps for themselves and for the folks around them ought to be as they take care of themselves and take care of each other moving forward. And so for us in schools, that might be the biggest lesson, how we take care of ourselves and how we take care of each other, maybe somewhat, if not a lot more important goals for us in education than, you know, how do I find the hypotenuse of a triangle, and how do I, you know, do I know the alphabet agencies of the New Deal, of the Depression era, and, you know, the other content that we have sort of frittered around for so many years, you know, getting back to the center of our work, which is the kid and what they need to do to grow and realize who they want to be. So there is optimism and hope in that kind of final note, because I think we can always go back to that to reinvent ourselves. And the mandate for that, I think, is clearer now than it's been for us in a long, long time. And again, interested in where we sort of overlap in that thought with other organizations, faith-based and otherwise, you know, that have to think carefully about what our next steps look like in this post-COVID world, and what lessons we want to learn in our rush back to normal, what lessons we don't want to squander in that rush.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Jeff. We appreciate it.
and we have a couple questions, and I think, well, why don't we start with the equity and bias question that we received, and basically that's from Lethelma. Thank you, Lethelma.
And Jeff can read it.
Oh, Jeff can read it. You can see that one, right? So why don't
Yeah, I just came back. So I'll read it out loud. Thank you for your time, Jeff. You mentioned there's a mandate to provide anti-racist education. What does that look like? What is the diversity of teachers and staff? Will there be a change since you are seeing a change in the student body? So there are a couple of questions there. The legal mandate around anti-racist education and some of the labels have evolved over the years. Anti-racism is a new label that we talk about in education. That's not a traditional label. We talk and some labels in the past that we've used, which I think are inadequate now, like tolerance education. I don't think that's a good label for our efforts anymore. But I do like the term anti-bias, and I like the term anti-racist for describing our work. We have a lot of specific laws that require us to celebrate diversity and work against racism in our teaching. In our state standards. And one of the most powerful and important ones comes from the Holocaust Commission, which not only requires that we teach about genocide and those kinds of tragedies, but also that we, in the language, I'm going to paraphrase it, I'm going to get it a little bit wrong, but it's beautiful language, that we equip students to carry the burden, that we equip students to do all that they can to fight against racism and hatred wherever and whenever it occurs. So that's language paraphrased in a law that governs our work with kids. So racism's not a debatable topic for kids to argue about whether or not it happens or whether or not it exists. It's actually in our mandate to work against. It's in our mandate from law to teach students to be on guard and fight against. As our diversity grows here at Central, we do see certainly that our staff, the demographics of our staff do not match the demographics of our changing student body. And here at Central, that means a couple of different things. One of the things we see across the whole profession of education, though, is that the diversity of teacher candidates doesn't match the diversity of our communities. And so there's work up and down and in some long-term ways that we have to do to attract more people of color and people from different backgrounds into the teaching profession, so that folks are there to work in schools. I mean, one of the things that I note is that outcomes in schools across our country show that people of color may not be having positive experiences in schools across our country, and then may not be then sort of going into education as a career as a result of their own experiences. And that's where our equity work in schools has to invest, so that all students have positive experiences and then are able to see paths into serving in schools. But we belong to an organization called CJ Pride. It's a group of schools throughout Central Jersey who meet together to speak specifically about how we can attract more diversity into our school workforce. And our human resources manager, Shunda Williams, is a member of that organization with human resources folks across Central Jersey. They hold job fairs for minority candidates and work closely with colleges to try to attract candidates from different backgrounds into schools throughout New Jersey. But like I said, the pool is difficult because there's not a lot of diversity in the pool of applicants. So we're working at that, but we need help. We need help in terms of incentives and other kinds of programs in colleges and universities and from government to help create a broader pipeline there, and to help folks from all different backgrounds find satisfaction and reward in teaching, and that will help us, I think, increase diversity in our staff. Another question: what % of students are in clubs, on teams, or other groups where they build communication and collaboration skills? So this is something that we have to do a lot more deliberately. Schools, when we have clubs and we have opportunities for kids to take leadership and to do communications work in clubs, we often sort of look at that and assume that that's a place where kids are learning to do really interesting and powerful things in terms of communication and collaboration skills. But schools aren't always good at doing that work deliberately. You know, sometimes schools teach a lot of lessons, or they think they're teaching a lot of lessons, but they aren't necessarily going about it as deliberately as they would go about, say, a science or a social studies lesson. So we've been growing in our student groups. We've chartered this year a few more student groups, particularly in the equity area. We have a Black Student Union, a Latinx Alliance, an Asian Student Alliance that were all chartered this year. And they joined some other clubs in work to kind of gather together and see how we can empower kids to communicate, so we can communicate better with them on more honest feedback about what their experience is like here at Central. And also how we work together to celebrate diversity across our campus. And then other groups focused on mental health and wellness that are doing similar things through an organization called Sources of Strength, which seeks to be really deliberate in kids' work on communication and collaboration around anti-suicide and other kinds of campaigns for student wellness. So that, with our Dean of Students, Mr. Ed Brand is our Dean of Students, who's been serving also as our acting principal this year. He's been heading up a lot of that work to help us become a lot more deliberate. I don't know what percentage of students are in those clubs and groups, but we also know certainly that those skills have to come into our classrooms too, and that's 100% of our students. Conflict resolution peer mediation programs are offered by the schools. What conflict resolution peer mediation programs? We do peer leadership and some other traditional programs, but what we're getting at now as we work through this year and think about a more personalized approach is looking at restorative practice in discipline. And there are opportunities for peer-led restorative circles and other kinds of structures there in discipline to ensure that kids have a role in our discipline process that's not just being punished, that kids take roles in working with each other to ensure that people are welcomed into and back into the community. So we've begun some work on restorative practice to see how we can broaden our discipline policies away from one size fits all kind of action reaction kinds of contexts to more collaborative, student focused and student led in some cases contexts for community building and return to the community after a serious infraction. So those are the questions in the chat room. If there are others, Harry, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple here.
We've got a couple of questions here. Just back to the COVID situation. my understanding is that we're returning to full days, normal schedule in September. Is that correct? Jeff?
We'd certainly like to. We haven't seen all the guidance yet, but that's our goal.
Okay, all righty. And then along those lines with COVID, is there any, do you know, like how has the student body, have any of them experienced death due to COVID of a family member that we know of? Like, are there, like, is that?
Yeah, I mean, we do. Yeah, no, we do know of staff and students alike who've lost folks over the past 15 or so months. And we've also had across our county some incidents of serious illness among students as well,
Yes.
particularly with the inflammatory syndromes and some of the other things that are connected into COVID.
So I guess my question for the faith community working is like, if there's something going on where you may be recognizing that at the high school level, it would be helpful for the faith community to inform the faith communities that this is happening in the high school, and have like a prayer, spiritual based thing going on at the same time. That would be a way to bring these two communities together. Not necessarily have a program at the high school, but be aware of, by the way, your students are. Because the students don't necessarily communicate to their parents what's going on, but to be mindful of that. So yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
We had spoken about mindfulness, Jeff, and that's used periodically in the school system, and also another question about like how can that intersect with faith? Okay, because it's like that's like a precursor to prayer, really, for many traditions. Some faith traditions are different in the sense that it's not so much mind, but it's body and mind together. So there's postures for prayer, that kind of thing. Certainly, there's that, and then like I remember one of the things I would advise my kids is helpful for the faith leaders to know how much time it takes now to pass between classes when you're on a normal schedule. What is that time now? I've lost track of it.
Yeah, so our schedule is, I think, going to be a big conversation point over the next couple of years. Right now, if we're back to normal, we have 8 minutes between each class period, and we have 4 class periods each day. And then currently on our schedule, there's a unit lunch in which all of our students and everybody on campus actually sort of has lunch at the same time. We're not 100% sure what that all looks like next year,
right.
Given whatever guidance we receive. But again, that if we were, quote, back to normal on our schedule, it would be 8 minutes between blocks with a kind of a nearly an hour block in the middle of the day for lunch. So there are opportunities, but remember too that our campus, from one end to the other, it can be a half a mile from one end to the other, sort of a straight line. So that 8 minutes is it sounds like it's kind of generous, but sometimes it's just enough, if not a little short for making a big trek across campus. Where mindfulness comes in for us, and we talk with kids a lot about the moments that they have to center themselves. And the short amount of time that they actually may need to do that, and how you can do that really at any moment, walking across campus, and so we have done a lot with different breathing exercises and other kinds of things that help students kind of not push down or push away negative thoughts or feelings they're having, but at least sort of step aside and regard them as something that's happening, not as part of them, but as something that's happening within them that they just kind of need to be aware of and need to be able to mitigate if they can. I think ultimately, and I like this thought that you offer of, as a precursor to prayer or whatever comes next. I think that's ultimately where we go with that conversation is to say, if we're all talking about to kids, here are the skills that you need to to leverage to center yourself on the moment. You know, here are the skills you need to leverage to kind of get a bird's eye view over where you are in the world right this second. You know, and here's some breathing, here's some other things that you can do to kind of stop the world for a moment. What do you do next? I guess is the question that that comes to mind. And so where does that go for the kid's heart and head from there? Does that go to prayer? Does it go to something else that might be a reaction to a situation that's going on in the moment? Does it go to a gut check on what are my values right now? You know, it can go in all different directions that I think certainly faith informs us on where that goes. But the biology of how I stop the world and center myself is pretty empowering. And pretty amazing, and I think is useful not just for prayer, but for all kinds of moments here in our stressful lives.
Yeah, thank you. We have
A couple more.
questions here. What can you get that?
Yeah.
The other one
Well,
there?
Lethelma, you offered to help with the affinity groups. Is that correct?
Oh, excellent. I'm seeing that in the, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking, yeah. So, and just to be clear on that term, because that's a confusing term sometimes, an affinity group is a group that students join, you know, to identify as an ally or as a member of a community. And in our context, you know, we have a Black Student Union, we have a Latinx Alliance, we have an Asian Student Alliance. We have various clubs for female students, for LGBTQ+ students. And these are all affinity groups. And we've been working this year to try and see how we can ensure that those groups give kids safe spaces for community, that they find in those spaces both allies and people who have experiences like them, and that they find community and platforms for even activism. So we're always looking for connections there with those groups, with members of the community. We were really pleased this year that, you know, to be involved in conversations about the chartering of a countywide chapter of the NAACP. That's new in this county, and something that we're pleased to connect some of our affinity groups to. So yeah, anyone, and Harry, if you can help me get in touch with anybody who's
Sure.
interested in.
We'll share it.
We'll
Yeah,
share that and
it.
we'll get that to you. And yeah, and there's, well, the NAACP is newly formed in Hunterdon County, and it's just rolling out now. So we have members there who are, I'm part of that group as well. So that I think we'll see more rolling out in September. I think is probably what's going to happen from my point of view. I had a question.
Yeah,
my wife. My wife is a teacher for another couple of days anyway. Anyway,
my congratulations.
as we were talking about, you know, the whole in the equity and bias section about you know, the different languages and the different profiles now in the student body. I don't recall my wife ever having like a workshop or whatever on like language sensitivity immersion or training. I know it was real valuable for me to go when I was away and I was immersed in the Spanish setting, about how it feels to communicate, have difficulty communicating in language all around you. I was wondering if like for compassion or for understanding, or for the students to understand that the teacher understands what it feels like to have difficulty communicating, or communicating, you know, like where you feel like I'm communicating a level that sounds way below my intellectual level, you know, because that's how it feels when I speak in Spanish. You know, I feel like I'm really not that smart, like people think I'm not that smart. And that's very much, I think, what experienced people, what they're trying to communicate. So my question just popped in my head. What if faculty or had a period of time where it was reversed, where they had to communicate in a language they were not comfortable with, for maybe just do it for a couple minutes, just to kind kind of get to the understanding that your teacher understands what it feels like.
Hmm.
That's just a
Yeah,
throwing
it
that out.
sounds, yeah. No, that's really a neat idea. It sounds, some of the anti-bias training that we do tries to create those feelings of otherness,
Mhm.
in those moments. It's a tough thing because people get properly uncomfortable in those
Mhm.
moments, and
Yeah.
how they respond in those moments. You have people who shut down. You also have people who realize exactly what you're trying to do, and they
Right.
broaden their
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
increasing the diversity on our staff certainly helps in this way too, because we're offering then to kids and colleagues more opportunities to interact with people who have had those kinds of experiences, and
Mhm.
who speak to what it meant as a youth growing up in that kind of context. That's important. But I think just in general, we regard, when we regard kids for what they bring to the table,
Mhm.
as strengths rather than as, well, these are deficiencies that we have to overcome. When we sort of turn our focus in on, well, who are these students and what are they bringing to the table, then we start to listen a lot more intently to those kinds of experiences from them. And at the end of the day, we love our kids and we don't want them to be uncomfortable. And when we give them opportunities to be honest with us about their discomfort, it's a game changer for educators. And I don't think we give kids enough opportunity to give us honest feedback.
Mhm.
And the kids who have language challenges here in our school, many of them are coming from areas of Central America where there has been other violence and strife and trauma that they're
Mhm.
carrying. These kids need they need a lot more of our care, and a lot more of our listening, and a lot more of our true sight into what they're bringing to the table, I think, than schools currently are equipped to do. And you're right, Harry, the teachers need, anyone who works with kids needs, can always have, I think, a broader lens into what that experience must be like for kids,
Mhm.
because it's distressing.
Doctor,
One discipline, I'll share this one little fact before I close up this answer, is when we look at our discipline over the years, we note some uncomfortable things. We note, for example, that students who are experiencing discipline, for example, for not having their ID card with them, that there are disproportionalities there. That white students, Latinx students, Black students experience that discipline infraction. It's a minor infraction, but they experience it differently. And it leads us to uncomfortable questions about, who are we asking to prove who they are? And who aren't we asking to prove who they are?
Mhm.
And that's a really distressing question for us to face, a real honest question for us to face about the comfort of our kids in our system. And so these are the kinds of concerns that we're wrestling with pretty deeply right now.
Dr. Moore, just as a thought, I share the dispute resolution section for the New Jersey State Bar as an attorney. One of the things we do in our program is we teach skills such as facilitation skills, which includes, as you just mentioned, the power of listening, the power of asking questions, the power of reflective thinking. And so I'll be glad to connect with you if you feel that would be something that would be useful for your setting. But one of the other factors that we include a lot of leadership programs, a lot of leadership training. For example, good leaders ask great questions. So just put that out there, just as a thought.
No, thank you,
Okay,
thank
great.
you. No, and again, I would want to connect and discuss, absolutely. Harry, if you can help us connect.
Yes, we
Sure,
will. We
absolutely,
totally
yeah.
will.
We
Mhm.
will, yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, I want to echo what the prosecutor said, and just thank you, Dr. Moore,
Yes.
for what you have done for us, what you continue to do for our students, and for being very candid and honest today with us, and giving us an overview of what's facing students today, because that helps the faith leaders to know how to be there for parents and family members and the students. So thank you very much for your time today. And we, of course, thank the prosecutor. She has left us, but for her time as well. We just wanted to move just a little bit to some announcements, if that's okay. One is that, and maybe everybody's aware of this, but the eviction moratorium was based on when New Jersey was no longer considered, a serious COVID situation, and it would be 2 months from that, which would mean mid-August would be a moratorium, and we know the numbers are going to be quite excessive related to homelessness and adjusting. And so if we can kind of come together as a community to think about how we can support those individuals, and I'm certain some of those will be in the student body for you. And then also meal assistance has been extended for children through September 30. So if you know any people within your congregation or in the community who are in need of meal assistance, just make sure everybody knows that they can get food all the way through September 30th. I just want to announce that Harry is retiring.
Yes.
His last day with us, unfortunately, is this coming Monday. And so I have so enjoyed working with him, and we'll miss him tremendously, but I know he'll still be in the community. We'll see him around, but his official role as our One Voice Project outreach coordinator will end on Monday. So please pray for him. We wish you well, Harry, in your retirement.
Thank you very much. I've certainly enjoyed working here at One Voice, and I will be shifting into a more, I guess, called volunteer role.
Volunteer role,
So
yeah.
you can't tell me what there's a quote. I'm retired. You can't tell me what to do. I get to choose what I want to do.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
but I will be active in the community
Of
in a
course.
supportive,
Of
in a very
course.
supportive way. And
Of
thank you.
course.
Appreciate. We are in good hands with our staff now. I'm glad Courtney's on board and has experienced some of the joys and frustrations
of technology,
of the
right?
technology and so forth. So
yeah.
we're in good hands. Yeah.
Well, I hope so. And Michael's, of course, on here as well, and
Michael as
Allison
well,
and Peggy.
Allison, Peggy,
We do want to make a couple of announcements. I know everybody's time is precious, but please get on your calendar. We're doing our in-person annual One Voice Summit, and the title is Prevention Through the Lens of Faith. It will be 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on September 21. So please, if you are able, it's going to be in person. We are locating the venue, and we'll announce that soon. We also are nailing down our speakers, and we think it's going to be quite a wonderful event. And also the One Voice Weekend, which is what was the catalyst for One Voice at the start, is to have every faith community honor means of prevention through faith in your, faith services, your communications with your faith communities, and also just in general, taking away the stigma from those who suffer from substance misuse, and how can we support each other and those who suffer, especially our youth with substance misuse and their parents. So anyway, that's sort of where we are at One Voice. We thank you, Dr. Moore, for your wonderful presentation, for your time, for, as I said earlier, your candid reporting. And we do have some pastors on this call, and I'm sure other ways, who would be happy to help you with affinity groups and training and such. And we will make sure to get your communication means to them so they can reach out to you.
Thank you.
Courtney, if I may,
of course.
Courtney, if I may ask, put one item on the table. You just mentioned eviction moratorium.
Yes.
Something our attorneys are looking at doing, working with the courts and institutions on helping landlord tenants resolve issues. So if you have any data that you can forward to us, that we can start building some type of database resource on that front, definitely, I'd be glad to connect with you further on that.
Yes, and we do partner with Prevention Resources and Family Harvest. And also we had a presentation from Christine Day and how she works with that in her particular area. And she gave us ideas to implement in our area. So I would love to reach out to you.
Yeah, we'll connect you guys.
Andrew, and we will, and anybody else who wants to help with that. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. I heard 60,000 was one of the figures that was thrown around. I'm not sure if that's accurate. I will check on that. But 60,000 homeless families sounds quite horrible, to say it mildly, right? So we need to be there and figure out how to be of assistance. And also, of course, unemployment will be coming to an end at some point as well. So just looking to the consequences of COVID and how to be there as faith communities for those in need. So yes, I will reach out about that as well. Any other
you.
questions or comments? Okay, I think Harry's going to close us in a little prayer.
Close with a prayer. Prayer for us as a human family. Oh God, you made us in your own image. Look with compassion on the whole human family and the family here in Huron County. Take away arrogance and hatred which infects our hearts. Break down walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love. And work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth. That in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony. Amen.
Amen. So thank you for all of your time. Once again, this is recorded and we will share it so that if you know people who weren't able to come and they would benefit from it, that would be great. And again, thank you to Dr. Moore, and God bless you all.
God bless you all.
God bless.